Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Let's Talk About Data show. We're back for season 3. So first show of the year, even though we're into February already, which is crazy. But we've got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about accelerating your database migrations using Gen AI. So I'm Tony Mullen, one of your regular show hosts. So you're going to be seeing me throughout the year. We've also got our other show hosts, Abraham, Prasad, and Lydia, who will be joining us throughout the year. Ibrahim is on our chat support today, so fire those questions into the chat. Ibrahim will be there to help you out. We'll also get them up on screen as well. So I'm going to introduce to our guests now. So I'll let them introduce themselves. So let's start with Mike. If you give us an intro, Mike.
Yeah, certainly. Morning, everyone. Afternoon, depending on where in the world you are. I'm a database migration specialist here at Amazon Web Services. I've been doing this now for 7.5 years, focusing on any database coming into AWS and helping people with those pesky little migration problems, modernization problems.
Excellent. Over to you, Guy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Guy. I'm a database specialist solutions architect based in the EMEA region. And also work with multiple database engines and relational database migrations.
Excellent. And lastly, John.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, like Mike said, wherever everyone is. My name is John Winford. I lead product for the database migration service. So I've been with the team since the product launch, way back at reInvent 2015.
Excellent. So we've got a good mix here. We're in the right audience for migrations for sure. So I'm from the UK. So Mike is, I know, UK based. We've got Guy from South Africa and John in the States. Where are you, John, in the States? Is it Seattle?
I'm in Seattle, center of the universe for Amazon, so to speak.
So it is literally a morning, afternoon and evening for us here. And I can see in the audience, we've got some people from Pakistan, which is great. And we've got Shazaz as well. Hi, everybody. Really good to see you on here. Do drop us where you're coming from as well. Put it into the chat. We'll get you up on the screen and we'll say hello to you. And it's great to have you here. So as I've said, we're going to be talking about accelerating your database migrations using Gen AI. And we've got a great lineup to talk about that. So let's get started. We've got a really cool demo for you lined up. So we're going to leave a good chunk of time for the demo. But we'll talk through, just start off with a few nice little questions to get us going. Do feel free, like I say, pop those questions into the chat as well. We'll get a guest to talk you through that. So let's start with a nice one. So let's say you're just looking at migrations as a user. What do you say are the key tools for migrations into AWS for databases? Anyone you can.
I'm biased. I'm going to go through to answer this question because you know what my answer is going to be.
So, well, I say let's go away. I mean, it's what I do. So the tool of choice years ago when I first joined was a little desktop product called the schema conversion tool. We've merged that towards schema conversion. I'm sure John can talk forever about that. We launched schema conversion with generative AI at reInvent last year. So that's definitely the tool of choice going forward. When it comes to data, database migration service is the, again, tool of choice. But to be honest, it's about using the right tool for the right job, especially when it comes to moving data. It's not a one size fits all for anything. So we're aware of a lot of the open source tools that are available. Oracle PG was one we used a lot years ago. Now we seem to get better conversion rates, especially with multiple databases. We don't just talk one database, say Oracle to Postgres. We talk about any database going to any database. And for those sorts of migrations, certainly we have great success with the schema conversion. What about you, Guy? I know you do a lot of migrations as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of DMS schema conversion. Of course, my tool of choice when it comes to the actual data migration is DMS. A lot of different endpoint support, a lot of built-in functionality, and of course validation, which is it's a topic that is often missed. Is how do we validate that the data has been carried over correctly, intact? So having that included as part of that, the DMS service offering is a big win, and certainly helps when it comes to implementation and actual execution of the migration.
Yeah, it's a good point, Guy. And we've done a lot of work in the data validation space lately. Our first pass of it was sort of a row by row validation, if you will, but recent releases have included essentially hash migrations so that it happens. I'd be spitballing here, but 20 times as fast as it used to happen now that we're using the hash validation to ensure that the data moves across properly.
Excellent stuff. We've got lots of people saying hello here on the chat, and there's an interesting question there just flirted up. I'm gonna fire it in. So, hi, does Redshift guarantee free copies of data, or does it attempt to do so? And you guys know this question, or we'll defer it to
not my area of expertise, I'm afraid. This is a Redshift.
Me neither. No,
So,
we always do try and answer it.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to guess and get it wrong.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
This is where we have our chat support. So Ibrahim, do your stuff and answer that question for our programmer, our XYZ. Really bad at these pronunciations of names. So, but lots of people coming in from Cameroon. We've got New York there, Corolla. Wow, what else have we got? I'm looking for someone saying they're looking for an SDE role at Amazon. Go and have a look at the careers pages. Plenty of stuff going on there. We've got someone from London. So this is great. But Mumbai, Bangalore. So yeah, do keep sticking them in there. Interesting as well. If there's any of you in the audience as well have used DMS or used DMS schema conversion, do pop it in there. Let us know what you think as well. Let us know any potential challenges you've hit. You have definitely got the right people on this stream to answer those questions. So one thing, Mike, as part of your DMA role, it'd be really interesting to kind of share that to the audience. What is DMA? What do you do?
Yeah, so DMA is the Database Migration Acceleration. That's what it stands for. And as the name implies, our role is to accelerate those migrations and in particular modernizations when they come into AWS. When I started 7.5 years ago with John and we created the Database Freedom Program, at that time there were only 4 of us, so I pretty much did everything everywhere with John and Questy's help. The team has grown a lot over the last 7 years or so. We've now got a US-based team, Asia-Pac-based team, and an EMEA-based team. So that certainly spreads the load a lot. But our role has been pretty consistent throughout. And there's 2 real aspects to it. There is the helping customers understand what they're trying to do. And so once a migration is qualified, and by that I mean we know for a fact somebody wants to move a database, not just thinking about it. But once we know that there's a real migration underway, that's the point where probably the more senior people in the team, are going to be honest, get engaged to understand what database should be the right target. Because as I said earlier on, there isn't a one size fits all. So what's your best target? Should you be modernizing? Because that's a question that's got to be asked. Or would you be better off going move to manage into one of our relational database services? So we do a lot of work around the validation and helping the business case and all that side of it. We also do a lot of work on the migrations itself. We get involved in pilots and POCs where we're typically looking to understand if those difficult things are possible. So when we've done the analysis, we'll come up with a list of, let's call them challenges, things that didn't automatically migrate. And those list of challenges, we then plow those back to the technical leads in our customer to understand which are the ones that are going to be the biggest challenge to them, which are the biggest problems for them. And those are the ones we want to do POCs on. And I will qualify what a POC means to me. So it means different things to different people. For me, a POC is simply proving a concept. So you're proving one thing, and seeing if that works. And they should really take 3, 4, 5 days. You really shouldn't be spending weeks on them. And we look at doing that for all of the things that are challenging. And that helps us make a migration picture for them of which ones can be modernized and which ones need to remain on their original engine and come into a relational database service. And then we also do migration validation, or validation is probably the wrong word, but what happens during a migration? Migrations don't take a day or 2. These can run for months and then years in some cases where people have got thousands of databases. And so we always recommend that a customer sets up a center of excellence is a name we use, a design authority, migration authority, the person or the team actually responsible for ensuring the success of the program. And we will take a seat on that panel. and we just keep our finger on the pulse. We get involved in the weekly stand-ups or fortnightly, however they're doing them, just so we know what's happening. And when issues occur, and I very deliberately said when, because you're always going to get issues with a large-scale migration. So when those issues occur, we can come back into the program and understand what the problem is and help resolve the solution. Again, it's all about accelerating the migration. So when my team's coming in and resolving the challenges that have been uncovered during the migration, we can do that without impacting the timeline. The migration team can stay migrating what they're doing, and my team, or the team that I'm in, can take those challenges away, resolve them, and then bring them back into the work stream. And so that's where we go. So it's actually the full life cycle of a migration we get involved in.
Yeah, and you really do help, in the name, the accelerator, you really do move clients forward. We work quite closely with your team, as SAs, when we bring database folks in, they want to talk about databases, speak to you, the migration acceleration team, you're there to help, and you really do help customers out. So if you are looking to do migrations, and do speak to your account team, get the migration acceleration team helping you out. That's my biggest bit of advice. I always say to people who are customers, we're here to help. Do reach out to your account team.
And actually, it's a good point there, Tony. One thing I always point out to customers when especially in the early stages of an engagement, most organizations that we work with, they have highly skilled database developers and DBAs, database administrators, but their day job is keeping their applications running. Once every 4 or 5 years, they might get to do an upgrade, but by and large, their job is about keeping a database running, keeping it running optimally and serving the business. The role of my team is modernizing databases. This is something that most people do once or twice in their lifetime. We're doing it every day. Every day of the week, we're doing it. Now, I can't promise to know the solution to all your problems, but I do know where to look. And that's really the key that I bring.
Yeah. You've definitely got a phone a friend somewhere.
Oh, yeah. No, you're there.
AWS. We've got a question here, actually, which I'll bring up because it's kind of tied to it a little bit. So from a LinkedIn user. So somebody who's from Manchester. Wow, you're just down the road from me. So that's great. That they've used DMS and they struggled with constraints during the migration. They got to drop all the constraints to do the migration. Is the improvements in that area? So
I'll take that one. This is just a bit of a factor of how databases work. So with the overall database migration process, if I can grossly simplify it, the first thing you have to do is move your schema, and then you move your data. But if you move your whole schema and you've got things like constraints and triggers and what have you on your database, when you start trying to move your data, you're going to have constraint issues, right? Because if you don't have everything loaded in exactly the right order, it's just not going to work properly. So when you're doing what we call like the initial load or the full load of the database, you've got to turn off those constraints. You've got to turn off those triggers. Then you load your initial data set. And one of the cool things with DMS is it'll replicate changes between your source and your target database. So you can keep things online during this process. And when that replication is happening, you can re-enable those constraints and the triggers and whatever else. And it's going to work fine. But it's that initial load, that sort of starting point that, you just have to have these things turned off. Otherwise, the database won't function properly. And, in some databases, it's quite easy. There can be some connection string parameters to disable all of them. But other databases is a bit more of a manual process. But there's some pretty straightforward database scripts you can run to just cycle through, turn them all off, put them in a table, and then cycle through it again to enable them at the end. So it's not fully automated, but it's just sort of, we're working within the constraints, no pun intended, of the way a database is.
I love it. Yeah, that's a good one, that. I mean, I know there's stuff you can do with Postgres because that's one of my areas, Oracle to Postgres, and maybe Guy, you can talk about that. You're a DMS man, this stuff ins and out. In fact, you've probably given me in the past where I said, what can we do with that? So
yeah, so to kind of tie into with what John was saying is we do consider it best practice to disable your constraints or script them out, as well as secondary indexes, etc. during the full load. There's obviously a performance component to it. If you are bulk loading data across and you have large amounts of secondary objects present in your target database. But when we look at most specifically MySQL as a target in its general forms, let's say RDS MySQL, self-managed Aurora MySQL, as well as the Postgres variants, there are extra connection attributes that can be used to essentially bypass these checks. Off the top of my head, in Postgres, it's to set the replica role. What's important to understand, though, when doing that is there may be performance impacts to doing that during the bulk load phase, because you do have all these secondary objects present. I would maybe err on the side of caution and really stick to the fact that we say it is best practice to drop these constraints. While there is a setting that can be switched on or added to the endpoint configuration, that is for scenarios where it is required. And I would really suggest sticking to that, because as mentioned by John, it is our best practice to not have those constraints present during that full load process. Just a call out on the Postgres SQL engine specifically, that session replication role can also be set at the instance level. That is not advised. If you cut over to your Postgres target environment and you forget to remove that attribute, all of your connections will be bypassing your foreign key checks. So not an ideal scenario to be in at that point.
No, definitely not. Put it in your DMS if you're going to set it. But the key one, I think, is also use the best practice, like what you've said. We have that in the documentation, the DMS documentation. Ibram should be sharing that on the screen. And you reach out if you do get stuck and have a problem. Again, reach out to the support team, AWS support team, and people like Guy will step in and tell you the settings, all the nice settings you need to do, because DMS is great and it has some lots of settings you can do to make things go quicker, go faster buttons, we like to call them. So which is good. Excellent. So I can see there's a few more, lots of chats. Really great to see everyone saying hi. It's really good to see you all. We've got people from all over, tuning into this. This is really great. So, John, you being a product manager for DMS, how has it evolved over time? I bet you've seen a lot of changes. And I think there's a presentation you do where you have a button where you just want to say, migrate my data. And, that's where I'd imagine that's where you're trying to get to. It'd be great to tell us how it's evolved.
Look, obviously we're trying to get to the point where there's an easy button. You just click the button and it's all done. And, Mike and Guy are out of a job and it just happens, right? But
just wait 5 years, I'll retire. That'll work fine for me.
Yeah, exactly. Look, the service has come a long way since we launched reInvent 2015. When we started, we just worked with a few key relational databases, Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, and Postgres. I mean, since then, we've now ramped it up to give or take 20 different sources and 20 different targets. We now have evolved to the point that we can work with things like NoSQL databases like Amazon Document DB, or, we work a lot of, since obviously we had the questions on Redshift today, DMS is used a lot to load, data warehouses like Redshift or data lakes. But, primarily it is a migration service. We're about making it easy for you to migrate from your on-premises system to the cloud. And by make it easy, we've added the things in like schema conversion, right? So when you're looking at going from one database system to another, you need to first convert that schema. And we'll be talking a bit more about that today in some of the enhancements we did there. We've added data validation. We've added transformations. We recently added data masking. I mean, the list goes on and on, all the little features and capabilities we've added in. And I will say one thing, if you looked at the service years ago and you haven't looked again, take a look, because one of the things that's been really interesting over the years is all of the edge cases that, we just didn't factor in, right? We designed this thing, we build it, we test it on a slew of databases, but trust me, customers out there will have thought of new and interesting things to do with databases that we couldn't have fathomed when we were building the initial iteration of the service. So, it may have been some obscure data type that didn't work, or it may have been some strange behavior with large objects. And, side passion there. What are you doing putting binary objects in a database? But, these are the things that, past mistakes. So we've done a lot there, and we've built better integrations. We form the basis behind some of the zero ETL integrations you see now happening out there. So DMS has come a long way. It's evolved from just a few migrations in 2015 into the millions now, right? So it's a very mature service, but we're continuing to add new things to it, which, as I said, we're going to spend a bit more time talking about today.
Yes. And we've actually got that. It's a really nice segue into, so what are
Oh,
the
there you
generative
go.
features in DMS? And I think I don't know if you want to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll break into the demo, because we've got a really, as much time as we can for this demo, we've got a really good demo showing it in action, because I think seeing it in action is the way. But if you want to maybe break it down a little bit about what the capabilities are, what we've added in.
So, as I've mentioned earlier, at a high level, there's sort of two parts. You first have to migrate your schema, and then you migrate your data. Now, when you're migrating your schema, if it's a homogeneous migration, that is from one database to the same database type, that's a very straightforward process. You can just use a standard no data dump, export the schema and then apply it to your target, done. And that's even assuming you're using DMS at all. Like Guy mentioned earlier, if you're doing a homogeneous migration, you might be better off to use the native tools. If you're doing SQL Server to SQL Server, just do a backup and a restore, that'll work. But if you're talking heterogeneous, you have to deal with converting that schema. And we've had the schema conversion tool available for years, and that's helped automate conversions between one database type and another. And a couple of years ago, we launched DMS schema conversion. And really the difference there is the schema conversion tool was a downloadable client-side utility. Sort of think about like an IDE, if you will, that would help you convert the schema. It had a lot of advantages, and it also had some disadvantages. Generally things like IT security. Often IT departments don't really like you bringing quote unquote foreign software in, and you have to certify it and make sure it's not going to do anything funky, right? Now with having schema conversion as a managed service in the DMS console, that removes that friction. So that came out a couple years ago, but both of the tools are very similar the way they work. They have essentially, and again, I'm going to oversimplify it, but a collection of rules that say, hey, if this is how a function is defined in Oracle, this is how you would convert it if you wanted to move it to Postgres. Or if this is the data type in SQL Server, this is the closest equivalent data type in MySQL. And it goes through the whole schema, abstracts it out into sort of a generic form, and then writes it in the target syntax. Now, when you're using rules can't cover every possible scenario. Like we can try, but going back to what I said with respect to data migration, when you're doing coding, the sky's the limit as to the flexibility as to what you can do. And it's very hard for us to have considered every possible combination that every possible developer that's been building any database code in the last 20, 30 years has possibly written. It's just hard to get that 100% covered. So what we did, and this was the big announcement of reInvent, is we layered on Gen AI on top of that. So if we go through and our rules don't convert something, we're going to throw it at the Gen AI model. And we're going, hey, we're stuck. Help us out. And that's really the thing. We're about trying to automate it as much as possible. But I want to highlight that we're not throwing the whole schema at the model. We're only throwing the things that we couldn't convert at the model, because that way you're going to end up with a much more consistent product. You're going to be less likely to end up with what we call hallucination in LLMs, and hopefully you're going to end up with a result that is near perfect, that allows you to be that much closer to that click button migration experience I was talking about.
And I think just on that, John, if my memory serves me correct, so please correct me if I'm having an hallucination at this point. But at your reInvent talk, you also spoke about the fact that some of the schema is obfuscated before it is sent to the LLM. And I think that's very cool from a security standpoint.
Yeah, so we that's actually a very good point, Guy. Not only do we obfuscate what we send, but we don't actually use it. And what I mean by that is we are not training and improving our model and making it quote unquote smarter based on your IP as a customer. We are just sending it to the model going, hey, give me the result. And that's it. There's nothing, you're not sending your IP to Amazon. We're not becoming, we're not using it to enrich ourselves, so to speak. It's just there to make it easier for you to convert. And actually, going back to the obfuscation, I want to be clear how that works. So we don't even send variable names or table names or anything like that. We obfuscate it back, and if your table is originally called customer, we're going to refer to it as T1, for example. And even the if you've hard coded any sort of text in there, so if you might have had a filter that said where field name equals Bob, we're going to obfuscate out Bob. So really, all we're taking is the structure of the thing that we couldn't convert and saying, please try to convert that back.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get to see it in action, aren't we? So we've got Omar saying it's great to hear the innovation, as customers are looking for seamless processes. Greetings from Mexico, greetings from Manchester. And also, Kappa, you're in the right place using Gen AI. You would like to know more on it specifically. Mike we're gonna segue over now into Mike's demo. So Mike, I'll share your screen and we can see this in action.
Apologies, I've got to look at my screen now, so you're going to see the side of my head, but it's too hard to change cameras. We had to go earlier on. Didn't work so well. So put up with me. So what we're looking at here is the console, the schema conversion console. Those of you that haven't used it yet and maybe are only familiar with the schema conversion tool, this should look very similar to what you're familiar with. On the left-hand side here, we've got the source database. In this case, I'm using an Oracle database. And in the destination side, I've got a Postgres database. And at launch, by the way, we have enabled generative AI for Oracle to Postgres and SQL Server to Postgres. So those are the two source engines, Oracle and SQL Server, and Postgres is the destination database that is available at launch. And obviously, we are expanding that list. John will have a timeline on that. I don't, but I don't know if there's anything we can share at the moment on that, but it's definitely going to be expanded. But anyway, looking at the list of source schemas, I've got one here suspiciously named Mike. So I'm imaginative with my names. And what this is a database that I created. I'll just refresh it and actually have it work rather than give me an error would be useful. Right. So we're doing a live demo, so of course it's not working properly. So I'm going to come out and go.
A live demo. I love it when things go wrong. It's the joys of a live demo.
Oh, isn't it just? It was active 20 minutes ago. Why has that gone inactive?
That's not a problem. You can pick up a question while you. Is it loading? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I'll reload it, and it'll probably fail the first time because it didn't close down properly. But anyway, whilst that's running in the background, I can keep talking whilst that's loading, and that's not a problem. But if we've got any other questions or anything,
no, we've got a really nice one here, which I think is.
Whilst that's sorting itself out, we'll take that.
Yeah, from Songul. So you mentioned about migration during. I should move that off so we can see this a bit better. You mentioned about migration duration around several months. What are the parameters you make that make the duration long besides scheme? So it's a really good point, isn't it? The length of migration. So what's from your experience? What are the things you see? And maybe things like generative AI, how that's going to help out?
So, yeah. So when parameters, that's interesting. So parameters within the app. So when I see a question like that, I'm thinking outside of the migration, because the things that delay migrations are typically testing, acceptance, integration. Those are the things that actually delay a migration. And even at the beginning, it's getting the business buy-in. I think we said earlier on that the goals to having a successful migration is having the business engaged, not just the technical staff. So in my experience, it's the things around the outside of a migration that cause the biggest delays. Now, we can help with that to a degree, but I can't write a test case for you because I don't know your application. I can advise you at the beginning of a migration that we are going to need these things going forward. And there are tools available that can help with the creation of test plans. So I guess it's when you're not prepared for the steps along the way and you suddenly arrive at a point where someone says, have you thought about security? Because that's a really good one that delays a migration. You get to, we're going live next week and security says, oh, we haven't done a security test on this yet. And I can promise you security tests take longer than a week. So knowing at the beginning all the things you've got to go through before you can go live is we can unblock it by making you aware of them. But we do require you to actually do the work to make them available. And actually, security is a very good one. And that John mentioned it. If you're going to use schema conversion tool, for example, someone somewhere is going to vet that tool before you're allowed to use it. With schema conversion, with generative AI, I'm getting involved in a lot of conversations at the moment with organizations about the security aspects of generative AI. Now, you've heard John talk about all the obfuscation that we do, and we do that with very good reason. But the fact remains that we are sending an obfuscated version of the code into AWS before we can run generative AI against it. And a lot of organizations want to vet that process. Now, it's highly secure. There's no issues with it, but it's a box you've got to tick. And the sooner you know you've got to do that, then it reduces the timescale of doing it.
I gotta say, the delays are very rarely technical. It's the products are there, and this is me trying to maybe defer some responsibility, if you will, but it becomes to be more of a process thing. Do you know what it is you're migrating? Do you have resources on site that understand how the system works? Or if this is some legacy system, it could be that everyone's moved on from the company and all people know is it's a black box that is running on some unsupported database. Mike was mentioning test cases. Well, do you have basic documentation around the system? Do you know what it's going to take to move? Say you're looking at moving some legacy system. Is it supported on the operating systems that are available in the cloud these days? Because if you're still running Windows 2000, it's going to be a little bit hard to move that to the cloud no matter what, right? So it's all of these things. It's really not the technical stuff that generally holds you up. I mean, once in a while, like I mentioned, we've encountered some edge cases where somebody goes and puts, I don't know, like 5 gigabytes in each blob for the database, and that can make it a little tricky as you have to move those across. Or, it's a data type that maybe we didn't support. So back in the day, we didn't used to support geospatial data types, and if you had a database that had that, well, that would have been a bit of a challenge to migrate those. But again, those are the things that I said that we've fixed over the years with the service, and we've generally covered all of those rough edges now. So it really comes down to be more of a business process and procedures. Do you know what you have? Do you know how to validate it? Are you going to be comfortable once it's moved to the cloud?
Yeah,
points.
And I think to kind of tie into your point, John, when I've seen it be technically related, it's often not the tech that you're expecting. I've worked on migration scenarios where we had a clean run at schema conversion, we had a clean run at transformations, etc. And in the end, we found that the environment that the POC was run on did not align with the production environment. And it wasn't in terms of data content or anything to that extent. It was at a hardware layer. So the production environment was running on, giving away my age here at least, but was running on a spinning disk storage array. So, and that storage array was running at 90+% in terms of bandwidth throughput. And that slowed the migration down, because we had to be careful not to overwhelm that spinning disk storage array and impact the production workloads. And that's one of the things I always like to talk about when we have those kickoff meetings around migrations is, what is the main objective? Well, the main objective is not to impact production. Like that's pretty much always one of my first objectives before even looking at the migration itself, is at no point should we be impacting the actual migration process. So, impacting the production environment during the migration process.
Yeah.
How are we looking there, Mark? Are we still?
I think we're good.
It's come back to life. Yes, as wise man once told me, never work with children or do live demos.
It's those gremlins get you. They just do.
Yeah, I've never worked with children. I've avoided that one through my career, but live demos, I seem to live with live demos. But anyway, with the best testing and prep in the world, it still trips you up every time. Right, so as I was saying, I have a very imaginatively named schema here, which I prepared for reInvent for the launch. And as you can see, so this has had a conversion done using schema conversion, and the schema object, the database storage objects, are getting 100% conversion. That's not that untypical for a database migration, at least one we're considering migrating anyway. If you don't get 100%, these are the things that hold the data, by the way, so tables and indexes, those sorts of things. Very common to get very high conversion rates on those. If not 100, we're expecting the very high 90s. They're very rarely the challenge when you're migrating data. But when you look at the database code objects, so this is where the business logic resides. This is things like functions, triggers, procedures, packages, those sorts of things. This is where the conversion rates aren't as good. And as you can see here, I've got an 83% conversion. Again, this is just using schema conversion. And that's pretty typical for a database that we'd expect to be modernizing. We do see them dip into the 70s and still be migratable. They're all migratable from a technical point of view, by the way. I'm talking more from a cost side of it. Can you create a business case around it? So total cost of migration. If you do see some of these down in the 40s, which I do see from time to time, that's not a reason not to migrate. As I said earlier on, I do this all day, every day. And when I see a really low conversion rate, what that tells me is there is probably one thing in your database that failed to migrate that other things rely on. So if you're seeing very low conversion rates on your database objects, I'd be looking for a user-defined data type or something like that that didn't convert, that the tables are possibly using, because that will stop them all converting. If I see a very low conversion rate on the code objects, I'd be looking for something in there, maybe an error handling routine that everything uses that didn't convert, because that will, again, cause everything to fail. So just understanding how to read the reports is as important as being able to do the conversion. But anyway, we got 83% here. And what I want to show you is one of the functions that I prepared for reInvent. And so what this one does, let me just open it up so you can see it. Wrong button. There we go, that button. So what this does, this is a report that's used by HR department. So it's actually a code out of a GUI from a Java program, I think calls this. And what it does is it reports on the relationship between staff in the organization. So who reports to who, what their role is, that sort of stuff. And when we have a look at this, we can see that we failed to convert. You can see that down the bottom here, our conversion is 0%, nothing converted at all. And if we go down to the action items, we will see, if I scroll this up a little bit, we will see that the primary cause, the bottom one says I couldn't convert the select statement, but the one above it is saying the reason I couldn't convert the select statement is because of the use of a no-cycle clause, something that we didn't know how to convert into Postgres deterministically. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you how we convert this now using generative AI. One of the things that's worth...
Mike, just before you do it, I think we want to highlight to everybody 2 key points about this. One, you can use schema conversion without generative AI. It's not mandatory. If your company is concerned about it in any way, shape, or form, it doesn't have to be used. It's an optional extra, and I'm sure you'll show people how we can turn that on and off and where to click it and what have you. But the other thing, and this is the cool one, and me and put my marketing hat on a little bit here, it's free. All of the schema conversion, all the generative AI for schema conversion, there's no cost to this at all for customers. There's a cost for the database migration, the moving of the data from source to target, but the schema conversion and the generative AI bit, no cost at all.
Thanks for that, John. Brilliant segue, and you beat me to the punchline there. But yeah, you got the marketing hat on, as you said. So what I'm going to do is show you how to turn on these free options that John's just told you all about. So we've got a number of ways of doing it. We got this settings button, and this allows you to set it at a project level. So we're seeing in a project at the moment. So within the project, I can simply turn on generative AI at that point there. It's as easy as that. Just click the toggle button, and generative AI is now available for everything in that schema. But I can also do it at the object level. So we're sitting on this, where'd it go? We're sitting on this function at the moment, and I can go up to actions. This button has always been here, but now when I click on the convert button, I've got this new option within my convert option, which looks very similar to the one in settings, where I can simply turn on generative AI for this one function. But I won't do that. I'm going to show you the new button that we added as part of the launch on the 1st of December last year. And that's this button here. When we click on this button, it allows us to do the conversion with generative AI. But before I do that, I want to show you this other one that we added last year as well. This was added actually 2 days before reInvent. And this is the integration with schema conversion with our Q developer. And so I won't do this now. We'll just run out of time if I'm going to do it. But it's worth mentioning that when I click on the convert embedded SQL, what that will do is it will take the project file from schema conversion with the generative AI features within it, and I can then load that up into the IDE of my choice. I personally use Visual Studio Code, and by using the /transform option, it will then spot that I'm converting a Java program or .NET or whatever, but the examples I use is with Java. So it'll spot that I'm using a Java program with embedded SQL in it, and it will tell me that. And it says, if you can give me the project file from schema conversion, I can use generative AI to convert your application code. And so by using /transform and integrating it through this button here, well, this button creates a zip file actually, that allows us to convert the application stack. And one of the things I was experimenting with for a customer a couple of weeks ago is I can open up my entire project, application project, so hundreds of files. And if I do /transform space -- all, it will apply a generative AI transformation to every single file in that project. So really cool integration, and that was announced, as I said, 2 days before reInvent. So was that 29th of November, 28th of November last year that one was launched.
Have you done a video on that, Mike? Didn't you say you've got is there a video which we can share? Because we at the end of this show we'll do some show notes, and we'll share a video on.
Unfortunately, I don't have a video on that. Those people that were lucky enough to go to reInvent last year will have seen me demonstrate it, but unfortunately, I don't have a video on it.
We'll get another show lined up for that one, because that sounds a really cool one to do.
It's a really cool part of it, and it's something I point out to people all the time, that databases by themselves don't actually do much. They just hold data. It's the applications you put on top of it that realize the value. And if I'm changing the database engine, I've got some work to do at the apps tier, and we haven't forgotten about it. Generative AI works in the application tier as well. Anyway, back to the database. So we click on the convert schema with generative AI, and it opens up this button which you've just seen. So I'm now going to say, I want you to convert this with generative AI. Now, so that's what that's now doing, is it's going through the deterministic conversion, and it's going to come up with the issue that we've already seen. We're then going to obfuscate all that, as John said. So your table becomes T1, T2, column becomes C1, C2. I can't remember what the constants get named, but they get obfuscated as well. We send all that down to the LLM. That does its thing, working with all the different RAG models and things, and looks at how we're using it and what we're trying to do. And it's going to come back and give me a result. And it's going to say, we think this is the right result. And we will replace all the tokens with the actual code, and we're going to put it in the window. But while we wait on that, because I'm going to actually show you this running, I'm not going to get you to take my word for it that it works. I'm actually going to show you it running. So I think what I'm going to do whilst it's running in the background is I'm going to run this in an Oracle database. So as I said, this is a bit of code that was called from a Java program. So I've got to call it via XML. So I'm just going to paste in the command I'm running. I'm not typing all this out. Too many errors going to be done that way. So I've just set a few column definitions, and I'm calling it through XML table. And what you can see here is that John reports to Matt. So he's had a nice promotion this week. I report to John, and Jay, who she actually heads up Asia Pac team. She reports into John as well. And then you've got a few other people in there. Fun fact for everyone on the call, because this really tickles me, this bit. I wrote a white paper for the UK government a while ago. I won't name the PM at the time or the ministers, because this is going to be live forever. But I was doing a white paper on population densities. And when you write a white paper, especially about things like that, you've got to use names that are meaningful. So in this white paper, every single road name that I used was a song title. And the people in here are actually characters from a popular TV program. So, for example, Sarah, who is the artificial intelligence, she runs Jack Carter's house, which is also where Zoe Carter lives. So these are all characters from a TV program I used to watch in its day. Prizes for anyone who can guess what the TV program is. The names on there should be the clue. But I get a real kick out of the fact that all these government ministers are sitting around a table discussing characters from a TV program who lived on roads that were song titles. But anyway, I digress.
If you can put it in, if you know the title, get it in the chat. See who can get it right. I don't know looking at it. So people will be Googling away.
I'm trying to remember the time frame when I did it. 2010s, I think, from memory. Anyway, we have now finished our conversion. As you can see, we've got 100% conversion. So if I bring the code down here again and just open up the Postgres side of it, what you can see, the things that I want to draw your attention to on here is we haven't marked it as fixed. We have said we've still got an issue with the code. And the reason we've done that is when you use schema conversion, it is a deterministic conversion. So what that means, give you an example. If we do select NVL in Oracle, what that says is select, if this column is null, doesn't contain a value, use the value from the second column. Now, Postgres doesn't have NVL, but what it does have is coalesce. So if I do select coalesce and two column names, it says if there's nothing in the first one, use the second one. So whenever I deterministically replace NVL with coalesce, I know that it's going to work. I can say I have solved your problem. That's a deterministic solution, and so we mark it as being no issue at all. Generative AI is what's known as a probabilistic conversion. So what's happened is we sent the SQL down to our LLM engine. It had a look at how we were using it, and it said, based on your use case, based on what you're doing with this code, we think you can write it this way and it will solve your problem. But we don't know that. You've got to test it. And actually, if you read that, that's exactly what it's saying. If I scroll all the way to the right here, it says it's probably right. And you need to do human evaluation as necessary for your use case. That's really what it's saying. Now, to make that easier for you, what we've done is we put these little markers in here, and it says, this is the beginning of the code that generative AI converted. And further down at the bottom here, there should be the other half of that says, this is the end of the code that generative AI converted. So you need to look at that code and determine if that was the right solution or not. Now, I'm not going to walk through all that code. Trust me, it works. I hope. The other problem with generative AI is you do get hallucinations from time to time. It's another reason we put that thing in there. But what I'm going to do now is I've converted that. So I'm going to go into the actions button here, and I'm going to do something that I tell everyone never to do. I'm going to apply it into the database. What you really should be doing is saving it as SQL. You then extract the SQL to your operating system. What it does is it puts it into S3, you bring it down into your desktop, and then you put it into your code control system. You test it, you validate it, you run against your databases. So applying from here, not a good move. It's very useful in situations like this, though, having said that, but not a particularly good practice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect into my Postgres database. Now, another little tip for everybody out there, because this is quite interesting as well. You'll probably spot that I've connected to a database that's at localhost. Now, I'm actually running on a Mac at the moment, and the Postgres database is running in RDS. It's an AWS RDS Postgres database. Now, the reason I mention that is I quite often get questions about, is it possible for me to use the tools I'm familiar with on the relational database service? Because this is buried deep inside the bowels of AWS. And I can promise you, if there was any public way of getting to that database, by now I'd have alarms ringing on my desktop because security would have spotted it and raised a security ticket against it. So this is a completely secure, inaccessible database running inside AWS. But I can still get to it from my laptop. I can run dbeaver on it and various things like that. I use a feature called SSH tunneling is how I do it. But really, I just want to let you know that just because it's an RDS, you can still get to it with all the tools you're familiar with. But I'm old school. I've been doing it a while, and I started on the green screen, and the command prompt is my friend, I'm afraid. So I'm going to paste in the, oops, that was the incorrect command I've just pasted. Let's try it with just the select statement. It'll work better. So if I now select that from the table, you can see that I've now run that function in my Postgres database, and I've got exactly the same results. At least I think I've got exactly the same results. Let's put them side by side so we can see them. Yep, all the level numbers are the same. The paths, you can see that John, so 202, which is John's number, as you can see on the right there, he reports into 201, as you can see down here. So all of the data is displayed in exactly the same order with exactly the same values. So although I haven't walked through the code to explain how generative AI was able to convert that code, we can see from the results from my testing that I can accept that as a successful conversion into generative AI. So really, that's all I've got. I can talk to this for hours, but
no, it's a great.
Q&A.
It's a really great demo and showing it in a use case and where somebody doing it with their own code. It will make more sense when they do it with their own code. Use schema conversion to do it. See what it can kind of bring out. I wish this was here when I was pre my time at AWS doing migrations. I tell you that. I wish Q Developer was about as well.
I remember our time in converting those snapshots. That kept us entertained for a year or so. Yeah.
You can really save time with this. And we've got some nice comments back here. So, oh boy, love using Gen AI to fix SCT action items, even though it's the SC. Yeah, because it's a good point actually, because we've got SCT in there. It's a good point at this point for really, I think I will let John take it up, that this Gen AI capability is not there in the schema conversion tool.
It isn't, no. The DMS schema conversion, the web-based version, if you will, that's our path forward. That's the product that we're invested in.
Yep.
And due to the way that we connect into an LLM behind the scenes, it's just not possible to do it in an efficient manner from a desktop tool. So we've had to go to the cloud, not only to get around those security concerns that Mike and I mentioned earlier, but also just as a way to have access to more tools, more functionality, better integration with other AWS services. We're just looking to have a more seamless process that is just not possible when you're required to switch between cloud and desktop. So Gen AI, it's in the console, and that's where it's going to stay.
Makes sense. And we got another one here. DMS is probably removing complexity, making migrations easy. That's exactly what they're looking to do. That's the aim with all this. Make those migrations easier, for sure. So I'm just looking
and you know what, Tony, that's a good point to bring up. We're constantly evolving. Like you'll notice at this point that I haven't talked at all about the Gen AI model that we're using underneath the covers, right? So I will say that we're using Amazon Bedrock, which is pretty obvious, right? We add our own RAG on top of that to make it even more intelligent and aware of the context of what it is that we're trying to do, that being convert a schema. But the model that we're going to use will change as time goes on. There'll be better models, there'll be more efficient models, there'll be ones that process faster. And that's a big bonus about having everything in the cloud, is that it allows us to iterate and evolve quickly as time goes on. And you'll see that throughout the year, because that's not that I can talk about roadmap at all, but needless to say, we're going to be making this better than it has been, and it's going to continue to cover more use cases than it does today.
And I guess as well, the more customers use it, the more feedback you get. You're going to get that feedback loop, aren't you? And constantly evolving the product in itself. Like you say, what was it, 1 million migrations today?
More than, no, it's it helps us make it better. That's all it is. Without the input, without the feedback, without the trials and tribulations, if you will, that you'll experience over many years of building a service. There's an expression that our CEO used to always say, and that is, there's no compression algorithm for experience. And that's exactly what this is here. The more we use it, the more you use it, the more feedback you give us, the better it gets.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that is probably worth pointing out, conscious of time, and this is something I actually deliberately demonstrated at reInvent, and from the feedback I've seen was appreciated by quite a few people in the lab. We've talked about it a little bit. I think John mentioned it, the hallucinations that we can get when you use generative AI. And I used a demonstration at reInvent. It was actually in the Java engine, but it demonstrated it well, where I chose to convert a bit of code where I didn't actually know what generative AI was going to do. I got one of 4 different results, depending on various things, which I've never really gotten to the bottom of. Every single one of them was wrong as well. It never actually converted correctly in any of the results that I got. But I still very deliberately showed it at reInvent. And the reason was I was selecting an Oracle select statement that uses a pivot command. And what that does is it takes row-based data into a tabulated format so you can see the data. Again, there is no Postgres equivalent to that. And in reInvent 2023, I was demonstrating in those days schema conversion tool to convert the application stack. And I was showing how you could convert schema conversion, you could get it partway there, but not all the way there. And in order to do that demonstration, I had to manually convert that pivot statement. And it took me the better part of a day. It's quite a complex statement. And it took me about a day to get that working properly. Now, the one that I showed at reInvent last year, whilst schema conversion, the generative AI element of schema conversion, never actually got it right, what it did do was it converted it in about a minute. And the mistake that it made took me about 5 minutes to fix. So what we're talking about is an 8-hour manual process as compared to a minute to get it wrong and 5 minutes to fix the rather minor mistake that generative AI got wrong. So the lesson I was giving is generative AI is in its infancy. This is not a product that's been around for years and years. We're still finding our feet, if you like, and it does make mistakes. but it still accelerates your migration by a significant margin. And it's about setting expectations as to what you're going to get out of it. And I've noticed that with the database side of it as well. It converts your code. It does a lot of that. Not everything it converts, it gets right. And we put the markers in there to tell you you've got to look at it. But what it has done is saved you an awful lot of time, even when it hasn't given you the result you're expecting to get. And it's something worth remembering. And this is only going to get better, as we've all been saying.
Definitely. It's like having a really, really great and fast personal assistant to get your responses back quick, and then you validate those responses. I think it's a great way to get going. So we're very close to the end of the show now. So I'll do a quick recap. We touched on it earlier about our show notes page. So this is our show page. Ibrahim will add it into the chat. I'll also, let me just stick the URL up on screen. But this has all links to all our past shows, our upcoming shows. So probably the end of the day for some people, evenings with people being all over. My time, it'll probably be there tomorrow morning. There'll be show notes. You'll be able to go back, watch this show. There'll be information on the show. Interestingly, I use Gen AI to create the show notes from the VTT file. So again, makes my life a lot easier than season 2 was a lot easier than season 1. So now season 3 is even easier again. So do go and take a look at that page. You know, and like I say, as all our past shows, there's a load of great shows from the past. We're here next week as well. So next week we have got introducing the new next generation of Amazon SageMaker. So that looks to be a really great show. So do tune in, same time, same place. You can get us on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Again, the links are all on the live stream channels. And a huge thank you to you guys. Brilliant show. Lots and lots of great information there shared. So, and Mike, we would definitely do that other show, the application one. That sounds really cool. So we'll look to get that in the calendar soon. Yeah, perfect. I think that'd be great. So excellent. Thanks everybody, and thanks to all the audience as well. We got people from all over here. We could keep going with questions, but I'll get told off if we stay too late. So we need to drop off very soon. So let me just do our out banner, and it's been great having you all here. And like I say, look to see you next week. It won't be me next week. I think we've got Ibrahim. No, we've got Lydia next week. So I'll be there on the chat moderation. Chatting to you all. It's great. So thanks a lot, guys. Cheers. See you later. Bye.
Bye all.